Hello viewers, it is time for the final round of the Manufacturers Cup. I only have one shot to get this race right. This is actually a remarkably simple race, 12 laps of Fuji in Group 3. Let us begin. First place, 311 points. I haven't got above 300 points this season, so could we cap it off with a win? Maybe. Alright, time for qualifying. Now this needs to go well, I think. I've only got one chance to get it right. 2 laps, I think. Let's begin with the first lap then. Fuji circuit, never been one of my strongest tracks, but we're going to give it a jolly good go. In the Porsche 911, this actually is one of the stronger cars this season and for this race. So I find myself in somewhat good position here, trying to get a decent point haul in this last race. And through this first sector, actually this is the second sector, through the first sector it was okay. Second sector, okay as well. But this final sector is the place where I struggle the most. Very, very tricky sequence of corners. And this first lap was actually decent, funnily enough. You see there, 1.5 tenths away from pole position. And so that was actually a decent lap. Oh, we can go better. Let's take a look at the sector times. Bottom right of the screen, 22.03 to beat in the first sector, which pretty much just turn 1. Big braking zone into turn 1, then the exit speed, of course, before you go into this fast left of turn 2. They're up slightly, 3/4 of a tenth. Our fastest lap, previous lap, 140.0, and the pole position of 39.9. Just need to shave off, say, 2 tenths, and we're at the top of the order. Difficult corner, that one. You have to really carry the speed in as much as possible. We're going to come up to the second split now. Let's see if we're any better off as we go past the sector. We're actually only just marginally up on the previous lap, but we can definitely gain through this final sector. As I say, this is probably my weakest part of the track, very difficult part of the circuit to get dead right. Carrying the speed as best as possible, and into this long left. Takes forever to get the car rotated. Back on the power, use a bit of a curb on the exit. Towards the final turn, again another very long, clumsy feeling corner. And you have to really go on the power as early as possible. Maximise the track limits on the left-hand side. And this lap felt good. I wasn't sure exactly how good it will be. As we come to the line, we're going to see there is actually going to be an improvement. And we have to go 1/4 of a second quicker to get pole. And by some divine miracle, I actually managed to do it. Come on! Get in there, Lewis! A rare Super GT pole position. Look at that, guys. Pole position. Can't believe it. Now we've got to just stay there. That's the hard bit. Oh, look at that. It's a pretty sight, isn't it? Look at that guy at the front. That's me, that is. That's me on pole. Can you believe it? This is going to be quite hard to defend, I think. Obviously, the very long straight here at Fuji makes it very hard to defend if you don't have any slipstream from in front. So it's not going to be an easy race. If I can pull away, then that makes it a lot easier, obviously. But let's see what we can do. All right, let's jump in. Now, I can promise you that this is going to be one of the most intense races I've had in a fair while. These kinds of races do tend to crop up every now and then, where you have a really direct and brilliant battle with someone through the entirety of a race. Into turn 1, and the guy in third lunges the hell out of the Danish driver there in second place, and immediately the gap rises to 1.1 seconds. So that was a very fortunate first corner for me, not losing any positions but also gaining a significant margin already, well out of slipstream range. And so ideally, as we kind of just spoke about, it'd be a great scenario if I were to just simply pull away at this point, do a Max Verstappen, disappear off into the distance, never to be seen again. That would be the absolute best case scenario, but as we all know, I'm not actually Max Verstappen, believe it or not, and so that's probably not going to happen. As we head through end of sector 2 into sector 3, gap actually increasing slightly up to 1.4 by this point here. So perhaps the Danish driver there just a little bit unsettled as we head into the end of lap number 1. It's always interesting because the gap was actually incredibly close in qualifying. It wasn't very much at all. It was like less than half a tenth between the two of us at the end of qualifying. But that doesn't always determine the race pace. Sometimes people can qualify badly and have much better race pace, or the other way around. And so, even though I was on pole position, that doesn't mean necessarily I have the best race pace. So this one would take a bit of time to kind of figure out. Crossing the line at the end of lap 1 with a gap of just shy of 1.4 seconds. So that's somewhat comfortable. Not absolutely ideal. I think a nice sort of 2-3 second gap is a bit better. But it definitely is better, obviously. But you know, when you've got a 1.4 second gap, one sort of big error and they're immediately back in the slipstream range. So trying to eke this out to maybe 2.5, that would be quite nice. But we don't live in an ideal world, so that's not always possible. End of lap number 2 then, crossing the line, gap 1.3, and I set a lap time of a 140.3, high 3, and the Danish driver goes to a high 2. That's always an interesting way of knowing if someone sets a quicker lap at the end of lap 2 by just judging the fastest lap. And so he gained 1/10 of a second on me on that lap. And looking back at the longer shot there, you can see that it pretty much is a 2-horse race. The guys back in 3rd, 4th and 5th and below are dropping off quite quickly. You can see it on the map on the top right as well. There is a bit of a daylight forming between 2nd and 3rd. So this is very much between the two of us. Now that was a really poor line through the long left there. And that's certainly just going to hand back the advantage slightly to my chaser, who is hunting me down into the hairpin underneath Mount Fuji. Hitting the apex quite nicely. The consistency is there, but the outright absolute pace perhaps isn't. It seems as though Zybase, if that's how you say his name, I'm going to go with it. It seems as though they have a 10th or 2 per lap on me at this phase of the race. And so that gap is going to come slowly down. I just have to keep my cool and make sure I don't do anything silly. Often these races can be decided on mistakes rather than just outright pace and outright consistency. It is very close. One second the gap, just over a second. So the tense nature of the race just beginning to build. It's a 12-lap race, so it isn't too long. Although this season has been quite an unusual one, I would say, in terms of the Nations Cup and the Manufacturer Series. I would say the combinations haven't been the most, let's say, creative. Some of them have actually been really good, but some of them are kind of a bit dull, and the season has been quite short. But we find ourselves here, lap number 4 at Fuji. The combination is whatever the combination is, and so I can't really change it. All we can do is give the best performance we can and try to win. And we're in a winning position, but can we hold it? The gap is hovering at 0.8, 0.9, and this is building up towards the crucial section of the lap, which is the main straight. That's where all the big overtakes happen with the slipstream, and so I just need to really keep him at arm's length. If I can hold him at 0.8 or higher, that's great. On this lap, I don't get the best of X's, as you can see, a bit of a correction on the way out, and the gap's slowly coming down, 0.8, and it's just going to drop below 0.8 as he just gets into that faint end of the slipstream range. And so we're just getting into sort of dangerous territory now where I really need to get a move on. Otherwise, if he gets any closer, he's going to have a nice run down the main straight next time around. So through this left, it seemed to be one of my weaker corners. At least the guy behind was taking it a bit better. And I would actually say into this braking zone at the bottom of the hill as well. He seemed to be able to just carry more speed in, release the brake at a better moment, and carry more speed through these couple of corners. And so as a result, gap coming down, 0.6 now. We're trying to cap off this season with a nice result. I haven't got above 300 yet this season. In fact, only 285 was my highest score, which is not too bad, but we can definitely get above 300. And in this case, 311 for the race win. We're still 7 laps away from that. Coming out of the final turn then, the gap is as low as it's been in the race so far, 0.4. And so he's absolutely going to have a run here and a go into turn one. We're both in the Porsche 911, so no difference in terms of actual performance in the cars, but he has a slipstream, so he is going to get closer. And I felt like that was a little bit too close for comfort. I go defensive and just usher him to the outside, and the move is not complete. He has to back out for the time being, but he's definitely and absolutely getting closer. The heart rate is climbing steadily throughout the race. We're doing our best to stay cool. I know that if I can just drive the line, keep nice and calm and not make any mistakes, it's going to be very difficult for him to get through. Because yes, he is slightly quicker, but it's not a big advantage. It's maybe a tenth or two per lap. And so with that, I do have enough sort of margin to fight back and keep my position. Coming down into the big braking zone, braking just under the Dunlop banner where the shadow is. And that should see you into this corner quite nicely. As previously said, he does seem to carry more speed in and be a bit braver through that braking zone. But the gap still remaining around 0.6. This is kind of where I need it to be. I don't really want it to be much less than half a second. He makes a bit of a mistake there. You see him just drop off the map on the bottom right of the screen, or the radar. And so the gap opens up slightly, 0.8. And this is good. Not really in the slipstream range. Drinking game for slipstream range. In fact, look at that, 0.9. I'll happily take that for the time being. I don't really have to think about defending into turn one. So the heart rate can just calm down for the time being. As we cross the line to mark halfway into the race, 6 more laps remaining, roughly 10 more minutes, something like that. As we head in towards turn one, a little bit wide in fact, not really carrying the speed I would have liked. But as we exit, still with the margin, he's still very much pressuring me. It's not the sort of all over me kind of pressure, but it's just one of them where you know that you make one glaring error and suddenly a 0.6 gap becomes a 0.2, and then you're really in trouble. You're going to have to start defending pretty much every corner at that kind of distance behind, and on the main straight you're going to be in massive trouble with that kind of gap. We're just keeping him at the right sort of distance, but it's getting harder and harder for that to stay the case. Onto the main straight then, end of lap 7, just trying to break the toe slightly. I'm very much aware of his presence. Guys back in 3rd, 4th and 5th. Again, the gap is slowly increasing still, so we don't really have to worry about them. Although if we start fighting a little bit too much, you can easily lose a couple of seconds quite quickly. And so we are very much aware of that, trying to stretch the race as much as possible and move away from that pack behind to give us a much higher chance of securing at least a top 2. I mean, anything less than a top 2, given the current position we are in, would be a disaster. I mean, 2nd place, okay, understandable, fair enough. This guy is quite quick and he's keeping with me, but 3rd place would be catastrophic. That should not be a possibility. We're going to try and stay at least in the top 2. End of lap number 9 then, we're going to whip it forward slightly. Previous lap of 39.9, so the pace is just slowly getting better as the fuel in the car winds down. Not much tyre wear to report of in this race. In fact, the tyre wear and the fuel in this race was incredibly low, so there wasn't really anything to worry about. Into turn 1, lap number 10, 3 laps remaining. He wasn't really close enough on this lap to send it at turn 1. So I was just waiting for this attack. I wasn't sure when it was going to come. Maybe he was saving himself for a later lap, because you know, in racing you can definitely go for the overtake a little bit too soon, at which point you can get re-overtaken. So perhaps he's waiting for maybe lap 11, lap 12 to spring the surprise, and then not giving me much time to kind of settle down and get a reply in order. So you can see he's very much as close, I think, as he's been in a couple of laps. He had a good attack chance, let's say around lap 5, and then a couple of laps where he's just hanging around 0.6, 0.7 behind. But now, very much on the rear bumper, gap down to 0.3 as we head out of the chicane into the final sector. In fact, it comes down to 0.2 now. This is going to be incredibly close, unless I can open up a couple of tenths here in the final couple of corners on this lap. I'm going to have a hard time here coming down towards turn 1. He's heading into the final corner, looking behind. That is as close as he's been. Taking up many pixels off my monitor in the rearview mirror. Onto the main straight then. Here we go. That is as close as it's been on the main straight. This is going to be the biggest attack we're going to come under. We're going to have to move to the right-hand side. I'm fully committed moving to the right-hand side. I want the inside. There's no question of that. He can go to the left, and I will not relinquish the right-hand side at all. And now that he's moved to the left, we're going to force him back over to the left-hand side fully. Just try to preserve the position. Now, that's pretty much a textbook defence, as we just slot in ahead once again. But this is getting trickier and trickier to maintain the position as we get towards the latter stage of this race. Penultimate lap now, not long left. But equally, he's going to get much more intense in terms of his attacks and much more daring as we get to the end. Pretty much everyone is always very wary of that on the final lap. You know, that if there's a win on the cards, you best be aware that a big overtake is possibly coming. As we head down here, he was always really good into this braking zone, as we've spoken about. Gap at 0.3, so it was quite close, but just take the normal racing line. Don't want to compromise myself too much unnecessarily. It would have been really tempting to defend that corner and possibly sort of run too wide on the brakes, something like that. We're just going to try to stick to the racing line if possible. He's not really gone for any lunges from quite deep. He's not really committing to that banzai kamikaze move, which could completely ruin your race if you get it wrong. He's really just playing the long game and waiting for that one opportunity, which so far I have not given to him. Onto the main straight. This is the last time we're going to go down the entirety of the main straight, and therefore this is probably his last remaining best opportunity to get this done, although the final sector on the last lap will also be a very good time. Heading down towards turn 1 then, final lap, lap 12 of 12, fully to the right hand side. He's approaching at a very late time, which is actually sometimes a bit more awkward. He goes to the left hand side, he's not going to try to switch back. On the exit, a bit of a moment and a bit of contact between the two of us, but I think it's just about passable. So we maintain the position for now, but as I said, into that final sector things could get very tricky given the very wide entries to those turns. Look at that, right on the bumper. He's not giving me any breathing room at all here, so the pressure is very much on. It's a very tense finish to this race. Can I keep the position? He has not been able to jump into the lead at all, albeit sort of briefly for a second or two whilst on the outside into turn 1. But he has not really sprung this overtake yet. Now heading down here, the gap is below 0.3, and I felt like, you know what, he could definitely send this. I'm going to cover the inside, make sure I don't overshoot, really hug the apex, ride the contact there, a bit of a bump from behind, and into this one, going to run narrow slightly. He's going to go for this move. There was a slight touch on the rear quarter panel, but not enough to send me off. We're going to keep going for now. He backs out. Through this left, he's not going to quite be close enough. Into this final corner though, easily a corner where he can send it given the width of it, and he's not quite going to do it. There is still one opportunity for him to win. If he gets in the slipstream, he can drag past into the finish line. I'm going to try to break the toe as much as possible, but thankfully after 20 minutes of very intense racing, it is going to finally be a Super GT victory. Yes! Get in there, Lewis. What a race. Oh my goodness. What a battle. Whew. That was very hard work. He gave me a very good race there. Wow, that's amazing. There it is. Pole position, clean race, and a win. My goodness, that doesn't happen too often. And for that, I get 311 points for the first time this season above 300, so that's pretty good. And with that, we have come to the end of the season. Here are the results. Round of applause. Okay, 28th for Porsche. That's not too bad, I guess. Unfortunately, I didn't quite make into the top bracket for the region, but still 131st in EMEA. Gives me a nice sum there. Well done to everyone who qualified for the World Tour event. Hopefully I can see you over in Montreal in about 5 weeks' time. But thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.